Welcome to episode 21 in our series on Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto's The Way of God, and we're in the fourth section, the section dealing with how to serve God, and we're up to chapter 3, which is entitled Love and Fear of God. And in this episode, because this is quite a short chapter, I'm going to start also chapter 4. Chapter 4 is quite a long chapter, and it deals with the Shema and its components, the prayer that we say twice a day, and has a great ramifications when we recite the Shema, and we should understand exactly what it means. I'm sure a lot of listeners are not aware of a lot of the things that the Ramchal is going to describe about the ramifications and the meanings of the Shema prayer. But first we're going to do chapter 3, which deals with love and fear of God. So the Ramchal begins. We have already explained how the love and fear of God are the particular concepts that bring a person nearer to his Creator and form a bond of attachment to him. This refers to true love and fear, namely, love of God's name and awe of his greatness, rather than love of his rewards and fear of his punishments. When one stands in awe before God's greatness, he is purified of the darkness associated with his physical body and is enveloped by the divine presence. The greater this awe, the greater the purification and envelopment. The highest level is when one attains the ability to feel awe constantly, being surrounded by the divine presence always. This was the perfection attained by Moshe, as our sages teach us. And I quote, "With regard to Moshe, fear of God was a small thing." As a result of constant awe, Moshe was continuously surrounded by the divine presence. True awe is very difficult to attain. To the degree that one does attain it, however, it has the power to purify and sanctify, as mentioned earlier. Feeling awe of God is particularly important whilst studying Torah and performing commandments, for the learning and observances cannot serve their ultimate purpose without it. Love is the thing that binds and attaches man to his Creator, increasing his spiritual strength and enveloping him with an aura of the divine. The main element of such love is the joy in one's heart, the flaming of the soul before its Creator, and the devotion of all of one's powers to sanctify God's name and fulfill His will. We have already discussed these concepts in their proper place, and there is no need to repeat them at length here. Included in these sentiments is belief in God, and particularly trust in Him. Through heightening one's sensibilities in areas such as these, man becomes more closely bound to the Creator and strengthens his attachment to the holiness and light. So that concludes this third chapter entitled Love and Fear of God. And I think we can sometimes gain a lot of, be struck by awe when we investigate God's creations and His universe. Sometimes something as simple as that is good to remind ourselves of God's power. The same force that swirls galaxies in the far end of the universe is the same force that is listening to you in your mind, with your thoughts and your memories and your intentions and your actions, watches everything and records everything, and it's good to remind ourselves of the scope of God. So now we're going to move on to chapter 4, and we're going to discuss the very important prayer, the Shema and its blessings. And again, we're going to split this episode into this chapter 4, into 2 episodes, and we're going to start the first half of this chapter now. So the Ramchal begins. The 2 obligations that we must fulfill every day are the recital of the Shema and the daily prayer service. When the holy temple, or Beis HaMikdash, stood, the daily and additional sacrifices were also included among the daily observances. We will now explain their significance. The first daily obligation is the Shema. This consists of the recitation of the verse from Deuteronomy 6 verse 4. Hear, Shema, O Israel, Hashem is our God, Hashem is one, together with other verses, which will be discussed later. The main idea of the Shema is to acknowledge God's oneness and accept Him as our ruler and king. That is, a Jew must realize that God willed many types of entities into existence, higher ones and lower ones, spiritual ones and physical ones, each creation having its own particular design and assembly. God gave each thing its own special powers and capacities, enabling it to act and accomplish depending upon what the divine wisdom decreed as its role. The root and cause of everything, however, is one, God Himself. Actually, God's oneness and kingship in relation to His creation is best understood by examining it from two different perspectives, existence and actions. Existence we already discussed in the first section. It was explained how all existence depends on God and is derived from His will. There is only one intrinsically imperative existence that does not depend on anything else whatsoever, and that is the existence of God. Everything else exists only because God desires it and wills that it exists. The same is true of activity that goes on in existence. God gave the elements of creation the ability to rule over their own particular domains, and each one can accomplish many things according to its particular nature. In reality, however, none of these things has any power or authority other than given to it by God. The only one who is the true all-powerful ruler and authority is God Himself. All other things can accomplish only what God gives them the power to do, and He is their master to increase or decrease their authority at any time whenever He so desires. This also includes another deep concept. The system devised by God's wisdom for the benefit of all things created includes many concepts of evil, as explained in the first section. The concept of evil can then have an effect and influence in the world. Some of these are as a result of man's own free will and sins, whilst others are a consequence of what is decreed to punish him. Superficially, this may seem to go against God's will. He wants only good. All His desire is to do good, and His name is desecrated when the wicked have power and the forces of evil and corruption prevail. Nevertheless, one who truly knows God's ways and delves deeply into their significance realizes the true meaning of this. All of this is a circuit consisting of various causes, which in a profound manner are all aimed towards one point, namely the perfection of all creation. When this purpose is accomplished, all these elements of evil will cease to exist, as explained in the first section. God is therefore ultimately the actual director of all things, and His plan alone is what will abide. His good and perfection will then ultimately be bestowed upon all His handiwork, as explained in that section. According to the way in which God's incomprehensible wisdom and true good-founded creation, however, it was ordained that the true nature of the ultimate goal came about through these roundabout ways involving evil. At the end of all these, however, it will be known that God is one, alone and unique, echad yachid umeyuchad, and that it was He who caused all these things in order to bring about the true goal, which is the genuine good that we have discussed. Also included in this profound concept is the revelation of the true nature of God's unity. We have already explained how all these roundabout ways are a general result of the fact that God created evil in order for man to banish it and thus integrate good, both in himself and in all creation. This concept gives rise to many principles and fundamental processes, all required by man to perfect every element and aspect of his being. For evil has many details, effects and influences, both in its intrinsic existence and in its relationship to man. Through all these, man is affected by evil and placed in its midst in such a way that he can overcome it, release himself from its fetters, and eventually conquer it completely. The existence of good, as well as its propagation and fortification, all depend on the extent to which evil is subjugated and conquered. The basis of the existence of evil, as well as its activity and influence, is the fact that God hides his unity and does not reveal himself with the power of his true essence. The degree to which evil can exist then depends on the degree to which God hides himself, as discussed in the first section. The basis of the annihilation and removal of evil, as well as the perpetuation of good in all creation, is therefore the revelation of God's unity. This is the meaning of what God says in the Torah, and I quote from Devarim 32 verse 39. Behold now that I am he, and there is no God with me. It is likewise written in Yeshayahu 43 verse 10, they must know and believe that I am he. Before me no God was formed, and after me there will be none. From all this, we see that the ultimate rectification of all creation depends on the revelation of God's unity. He was, is, and will be one, alone, and unique, even though at the present this is not as universally recognized as it should be. In the ultimate future, however, this will be revealed to all creation as it has been foretold. And I quote from Zechariah 14 verse 15. On that day God will be one, and his name shall be one. The Jews were worthy of God's true Torah, however, and are therefore aware of this truth and bear witness to it even now. God therefore told us through his prophet, I quote from Yeshayahu 43 verse 12, "You are my witnesses," says God. This is a great privilege for us. The daily cycle is divided into day and night, as discussed earlier. The same is true of its direction, and each morning and evening the system is renewed and the angels take their posts to do their assigned tasks, following the general ongoing order. At these times, the Jew also has his assigned task. This is his obligation to bear witness to God's unity in all its aspects. This unity includes the aspects of existence, authority, and providence. With respect to existence, God alone is the only necessary being, while the existence of all other things comes from him and is dependent on him. With respect to authority, God alone is the one unique authority, and nothing can function without his giving it the power and authorization to do so. With regards to providence, everything has one cause and purpose. Even though things may come about through many exceedingly complex, roundabout ways, all this originates from God, who is bringing everything to its ultimate goal of true perfection. Even though this might not be obvious now, it is the ultimate underlying truth, and it will be revealed and known in the end. Among the things that one must understand is the concept that God is king over all his creation. Namely, that God's existence is not dependent upon anything else that exists, and neither is God's existence comparable to anything else. He inherently exists and is perfect in his own right. He has no relationship with anything else, neither above him nor below him. Nothing above him causes him to be, and neither is there anything below him or on par with him, which even contributes to his being. It is for this reason that one of his names is Elohim, which means powers, for God is the source of all powers, to reflect, as mentioned, that God is the one being or power that is intrinsically necessary and imperative for all else. On the other hand, God willed that other things be, and he created everything in such a way that everything depends upon him for his existence. For this reason, God is called by an additional name, which means master over all. Everything comes from him, all is his, and he has full authority over all things to do as he desires. In a manner of speaking, however, we can also say that as a result of his goodness and love, God also desired to display his humility. He thus descended, as it were, from his lofty status and associated himself with his handiwork, even though created things are actually not associated with him at all. He desired to relate to them to the degree that a king relates to his subjects. In this respect, he would be considered as their leader and ruler, and, figuratively speaking, he is then honoured by them, just as a king is honoured by his subjects. It is thus written in Mishlei 14 verse 28, in a multitude of people is a king's honour. It is in this respect that we call God the King of the universe. We consider him as our leader, and he is thus honoured by us. We are also required to do his bidding and obey him, no matter what he commands us, just like the subjects of a monarch. As a result of this, we are also required to recognize God every day and confirm the authority of his kingdom, subjecting ourselves to both him and his decrees, like the subjects of a king. This is called the acceptance of the yoke of the heavenly kingdom. This is the significance of the essence of the Shema, consisting of the verse from Deuteronomy 6 verse 4, Hear, O Israel, Hashem is our God, Hashem is one. We are confessing that God is the ultimate king and ruler of all creation, both above and below. We thus accept the yoke of his kingdom and subjugate ourselves to him, as explained previously. All of these concepts also have a significant effect in rectifying all of creation in general. The patterns and systems of creation are set up in such a way that when God's authority is known and confessed by all mankind, every type of good and prosperity exists in the world. Blessings are increased, and the world abides in peace. When the servants rebel, on the other hand, and do not subjugate themselves to God and recognize his authority, then good is lacking. Darkness prevails, and evil dominates. These ways of God in general are transmitted to all parts of his creation, both above and below, including both those who act and those who are acted upon, as discussed in the first section. Whether God's kingdom is recognized or not, however, obviously depends completely on the deeds of man in the world below. All these principles have already been explained in their proper place. There is one important point that relates to our current discussion. Whenever any reason exists for the Creator to manifest himself in his kingdom and rule over his world, it results in great good and prosperity among mankind. There is an increase of the holy, pure illumination together with everything good, whilst the forces of evil are humbled and subjugated, so that they should not be able to undermine the good of the world. When God hides his presence and does not reveal his power, then the forces of evil propagate and become dominant. The results of this are misfortune in every place associated with these forces, and this includes everything evil that exists in the world. When the Jews fortify themselves every day, accepting God's kingdom and acknowledging it with their hearts and mouths, then God manifests himself in his world, and the powers of evil are enfeebled under the good. Blessing is thus transmitted to the world. When the Jew bears witness to God's unity in the previously mentioned manner, then God reciprocates and responds in a similar manner. God exalts himself in his unity and strengthens it, enhancing the rectification of the world step by step, directing it towards the ultimate rectification that is the sole aim of God's orchestration of everything. God's plan is then fulfilled, namely that all creation moves closer to a perfect state of good. What a person must understand here is that the world is rectified only by man and not by itself. That is, according to the way in which the world was originally arranged and continues to function. Every sequence of events must ultimately result in perfection. This is a corollary of God's goodness and power. God's wisdom decreed, however, that this should come about through man. In bringing about the ultimate perfection, man is also perfecting himself. In this manner, man furthermore attains the highest possible degree of perfection, since he himself is its master, as discussed previously. The essence of the matter is, therefore, that whatever God arranged and prepared to perfect, his handiwork will be fulfilled and translated into action by man, so that in doing so, man will be able to perfect himself in an appropriate manner. And we're going to pause there, which is about halfway through this chapter, and we'll continue with this in the next episode. But we are reminded, perhaps as a kind of review of this section, that we must not be in denial about the true reality of God's existence and God's power over the universe and ultimately power over us. But what we have to do is recognizing God and living in his ways feeds good energy throughout the universe and dispels bad, evil influences throughout the universe. And this is very important. So we'll pick up on this in the next episode, where we continue past. We're just right at the beginning of the Shema. We've explained the meaning of the unity of God, the first Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and we'll continue on with the rest of the passages in the next episode.